It is, of course, a global university of the airwaves and an open one. And there are no tuition fees. But there is something important tonight that we have never done before. And this is episode 150. You'll already know that we had to pause the extra Mother of All Talk shows on Wednesday nights, replaced by an entirely free Galloway show, which did fantastically well for a first sighting. 59,000 views on it, I think, and the podcast of it doing record business for free. And this is still free, and you can watch it if you can't pay or if you won't pay. But I'm asking you this week for the first time to make a donation by PayPal. The button will come up throughout the show so that we don't lose the mother of all talk shows. I'm currently seeking a sponsor for this show. If you are someone that could sponsor it, please get in touch with me. Or 10 sponsors, or 50. But until we get a sponsor, the show is in danger, which would be a very great pity indeed, because the average audience of this show over the last month has been 1.1 million people, making it the biggest political show on the planet, at least on the English-speaking planet, which, as our rulers know, is, of course, the only part of the world that matters. And it's because we don't think like that we have managed to get viewers from every single part of the world. Our podcast is number one, I think, in Singapore, of all places. It came in at number one in Tanzania last week, entered the charts at number one. So we are a prime broadcasting asset. We just don't have any money. So we need the viewers from now on to support this show if we're going to guarantee its success. If you all gave $10 each, we'd have enough to go nightly. If you all gave $5 each, ditto. If you gave $1 each, we'd be sitting pretty and secure for the rest of the year. That's what I'm asking you to do. Give what you can on PayPal. Now, as I said at the beginning, Imran Khan confounded the regime change operation in Pakistan with a boundary. He hit the Americans for 6, but they haven't gone away, you know. The background to this is important. My background to this is important. In front of me, you'll see 2 of my proudest possessions. I hope that you can see them. They are my awards from Pakistan, given over decades. I hold the 2 highest civil awards in Pakistan, the Hilal-e-Qaid-e-Azam and the Hilal-e-Pakistan. I have a deep and long association with that country. There they are, a wonderful Roman staff here, and they have pride of place in my household. I want to talk about Imran Khan. I'm not his party man. Let me make that clear. Partly because I spent decades, literally 3 decades, at the side of the late Benazir Bhutto, the then leader of the Pakistan People's Party. I even campaigned for her in 1988 when she became the first woman prime minister in the Muslim world. I was with her throughout. I spoke to her just hours before she was murdered in Rawalpindi in Pakistan when she returned yet again to contest a general election. So I'm not an Imran Khan party man, but I do absolutely respect him. I've had good relations with all of the leaders of Pakistan, with Benazir Bhutto, with Nawaz Sharif, and with Imran Khan. But Imran Khan is a friend of mine, and I respect him absolutely. If it wasn't for the day that he's just had in Pakistan and the hour that it is in Pakistan now, he'd be on the show here with me now, and I hope that he will be here next week. The United States National Security Council took a decision to regime change Imran Khan. Pakistan, a country of 220 million people, just like that, the National Security Council decided that their Prime Minister had to go. How's that for interfering in other countries' politics? They conveyed it through Under Secretary of State Mr. Lu, L.U., who actually wrote it in a letter to the leaders of the opposition in Pakistan in terms, and I paraphrase, but only just a paraphrase. The letter said that relations between the United States and Pakistan would not improve as long as Imran Khan remained Prime Minister, and that the only way that relations could improve is if an election were to return someone else as Prime Minister. As clear an intervention in someone else's sovereign affairs as it is possible to imagine. Unfortunately for the United States, this letter found its way into the hands of Imran Khan. The proximate reason for it is obvious enough. Pakistan has the closest possible relations under all prime ministers, indeed even under military dictators in the past, with the People's Republic of China, its neighbor. And that was difficult for a United States bent on regime change in Beijing to handle in the first place. But on the first day of the Russian military operation in Ukraine, where was Imran Khan? He was in Moscow, signing a deal with President Putin to receive at knockdown prices a guarantee of Russian gas and a guarantee of Russian wheat in order to heat his people, in order to feed his people, in order to keep the wheels of industry turning for his people. In other words, he was doing his job, his duty as the Prime Minister of Pakistan. But this double harness of a Pakistan in closer cooperation with Russia and in an ironclad alliance with China lit a fuse which they hoped, still hope, would lead to the explosion of Imran Khan's premiership. They put together a motion of no confidence, which the Speaker just kicked out of Parliament this very day, because it was the fruits of a foreign conspiracy and because Imran Khan had already asked the President of the country to dissolve the National Assembly and hold general elections within 90 days. General elections which I confidently predict will see Imran Khan sweep the country if the United States does not ensure that the army, whose top brass are playthings of the United States and always have been, ever since the country was created, the military which hanged the martyr Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the military which overthrew elected prime ministers like Nawaz Sharif, like Benazir Bhutto. If the military rigs the election, then there will be serious trouble in Pakistan, a mighty country, in a strategically vital place in the world, and of course, in possession of a fleet of nuclear weapons. It doesn't get much more dangerous than that. Even worse, they may kill Imran Khan, their cricketing hero, their prime minister who has stood tall and been visible throughout the world as a champion of justice in Pakistan, in Asia, and in the world. And it's the fear of assassination which has led the government in Pakistan to step up the Prime Minister's personal security because they became aware of a plot to murder him. So if you are a religious person, then pray for the safety of Imran Khan. Not just because he's a fine and noble political figure, but because the murder of Imran Khan would be an extremely catastrophic event in the history of South Asia and in the history of the world, and would set in motion events potentially cataclysmic in their importance. We'll be taking calls, of course. They're sleeping in Pakistan now, but we'll be taking calls on this subject. There are millions of overseas Pakistanis around the world. The government has acted swiftly before leaving office this evening. They have dismissed the discredited governor of the Punjab, one Mohammed Sarwar, a former parliamentary colleague of mine. I've known him as a loyal supporter of every single party in Pakistan. He's a man that has betrayed everyone that ever helped him, everyone that ever worked with him, including me. If I were to tell you the even bare bones of his serial betrayals, well, we wouldn't have anything else on the show. But one day maybe I'll make a special podcast about the now dismissed and disgraced governor of the Punjab, ex-Mohammed Sarwar, ex-governor of the Punjab. Of course, the war drags on in the Ukraine, the American-Russian war, in which, as Peter Hitchens, that well-known Bolshevik, writing in that well-known communist newspaper, the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday, this very day, described as a US-Russian war, with the Ukraine being used merely as a battering ram. It is a bloody and wholly unnecessary war, one which could have been avoided and right up until the last moment. It emerged today in Germany that Prime Minister Scholz of Germany begged the Ukrainian leader Zelensky to, are we allowed to say Zelensky? We've got to drop the Z. Ulansky, whatever you want to call him. Scholz begged him, make a statement that you will definitely be neutral, you will definitely never join NATO. And having taken advice in Washington, no doubt, Zelensky refused to do so. If he had done so, this bloody war could have been avoided entirely. As it is, it drags on. It will, of course, come to only one conclusion, as everyone involved in cheering from the sidelines or demanding more weapons and more action, like the 101st Chairborne Division in television studios and editorial offices all over the world are doing. Everyone knows this war can only end one way, and that is in the acceptance of the minimal terms that Russia set out at the beginning, together with new terms that have become inescapable, ineluctable, because a war had to be fought to secure them. But I believe and hope that this war will come to a negotiated end, and soon. But people are trying their best to prolong it. I predicted last week to ribaldry from some surprising quarters that the United States was planning a false flag event, either in the form of a chemical or biological weapon attack that never was, or might have been actually as a provocation launched by their own friends, perhaps in the Nazi Azov battalion, or some other kind of event. And it may very well be that the other kind of event is what we are now seeing. In the town of Bucha, in the Ukraine, we are seeing a well-coordinated, globally coordinated attempt to paint a picture of some ghastly, hideous war crime that has taken place there. I don't know for sure, of course, any more than you do, because this is a war in a country full of mobile phones and in a country packed full of journalists with surprisingly little war footage. But some footage has emerged that is intended to suggest that a war crime was committed by the Russian armed forces in the town of Bucha. I don't believe it, because I haven't seen any evidence to make me believe it, but I have seen lots of evidence that suggests that it is indeed a false flag. Whether it's the corpses that wave their hand as the trucks go by, or the same corpse sitting up in the rear view mirror once the vehicle filming the situation had passed. I'm not making this up. You can find it easily on social media, on my Twitter feed. Or because I'd already seen that very street, that very footage, in which it was described as strewn with Russian soldiers' bodies, when they were trying to suggest that Ukraine had counterattacked and liberated Bucha, rather than the truth that the Russians had withdrawn from it and the Ukrainian armed forces had then occupied it. Or because the mayor of Bucha, when Russia withdrew on the 30th of March, tweeted pictures of himself in the town saying that the Russians had gone and that the city was now liberated. Except he didn't make any mention at all of any atrocity, any war crime that had taken place there. I know of lots of other war crimes, and again, if I were to adumbrate them, it would take the rest of the show. But I'm not at liberty to do that, though you may very well make calls and send messages to allow me to respond over the course of the show. So I don't believe that Bucha was a war crime. I believe it belongs in the long line of false flag operations used to trigger war from the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam in the 1960s, now absolutely revealed to have been a false flag operation, to the attack on the American warship, the Vincennes, in the Mediterranean, to the false flag of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, to the false flag of the Gaddafi forces being given Viagra and sent out to rape people in eastern Libya. I've heard too many of these to believe them without evidence. But time will tell. One of the good things about the fact that a lot of clever people have not been fooled by all of this war propaganda is that they are well able to debunk the debunkable. We'll be talking about the Ukraine-Russia war, and we'll be talking about fake news in the course of the show with new guests, all of them with considerable followings on social media, and all of them well qualified to add to the sum of human knowledge.